maybe your thoughts around what could some firms do to integrate fairness and other trust principles into their AI processes?
Sure. Especially listening to your points, I certainly appreciate it with utmost respect. And you mentioned about international cooperation. And before I actually come to the esteemed question, this kind of reminds me of the nature of what we call as in the field of IP law, since I'm from the legal side. We call it patent cooperation treaty. So for example, companies which are in telecom or any important sector where a lot of patents are filed and agreed upon and patent usage rights are settled as to how companies will use it, vendors will use it. Patent cooperation treaties help a lot when a lot of IP offices, like in Japan or Singapore, India. So PCTs help a lot to bridge on certain IP rights. Similar can be done in the case of AI because recently WIPO, in partnership with a firm, released a report about the rise of Gen AI patents and publications. So I think when AI software patents are becoming a norm and there will be some legal challenges which will be contested, I think some AI cooperation avenues will happen. Some will happen at a bilateral level, like countries will do it, some diplomatic agreements, some will happen, between the Asia Pacific divisions or Western divisions, household. But on your question per se, when we look at corporate governance, I think the one issue is, of course, there are different layers. We see that board of directors take a decision. There are aspects of confidentiality. But I think what is going to affect largely is more around the necessity of knowledge management in AI. Because certain things remain confidential, they will be. But the utility and the aspect of how do you associate, like how do you do things, how do you attribute, I think that changes a lot. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to come to compliance because sometimes, again, I think the keynote speaker very rightly mentioned that there are around 30 to 40 regulations and regulatory documents just keep piling up. And I think, as I remember, as far as my understanding is, it all started with the Bletchley Declaration. Then G20
the UK.
Yeah, G20 India ended, G5 came in, then the South Korean Seoul Summit happened, and a lot of things keep happening. The US Senate comes up with a report, the Japanese Cultural Ministry or Office comes up with a report on Gen AI. So when a lot of documents come, there will be a lot of uncertainty because in my professional view, it is more of a knee-jerk reaction issue with a lot of entities, not just companies, even with companies. So I'll just stop at here.
Please go ahead. Maybe you can just finish your point.
Sure. Okay, I'd appreciate that. So to state that very clearly, what is noticeable is that when it comes to the lack of proper regulatory architecture, because even governments are concerned, we just don't wish to be too imposing, right? In March, an advisory came in by our own government of India, and that affected the whole AI community, the open source community, and the concern was very reasonable that if a person who is sitting in Chennai, studying from a local engineering college, will he be or she or whosoever will be able to get approval for their AI systems in Lodi or New Delhi, right? That won't be possible. It would apply to somebody in Guwahati, right? Because we are a nomad economy, everyone is using. So I think this comes in, but knowledge management actually helps a lot because ISO standards are still developing for its possibilities.
The next question that I had, and maybe I'll start off with you, Abhivardhan, is, and it makes my question easier because the points that you make an actual segue to the question that there are piles and piles of regulations that are at various stages of being development, deployment, etc. So how does one look at achieving the trade-off between compliance and innovation? While I'm sure that the world is gung-ho about what AI can achieve, how it can help humanity, how it can help the businesses, but there's an element of compliance and regulation as well. So what would be a trade-off that firms should essentially look at?
So I will give a self-regulatory point of view, not necessarily a top-down approach, because I believe that self-regulation works in some areas, in some areas it might. But I think one way which we look at it is, number one, I think firms can try to enable certain market practices which are sustainable, and that can be easily done by leveraging as to what practices are making sense. Because whenever you develop a solution, nowadays, since 2022, when the Gen AI movement gained its or let us say value, after 2023 we saw the rise of important chatbots like ChatGPT and Perplexity is there, Anthropic is there. One thing we saw that a new term came in various terms and conditions which we call as AI for preview, preview-based AI. Now, what is the legal status of it? Is it a full range product with specific terms and conditions? Is there any exact liability? Can't say that. Why? They'll say, okay, fine, you're paying us, but still, we are also testing it as a research lab. So it's not easy to affirm a sense of liability. So AI for preview is there, AI as a service, AI as an infrastructure as a service. So what happens is that for such nuanced models, a much practical approach is that why don't we focus on more about what is the long-term maintenance aspect and how do we keep a track of it internally and then see, okay, fine, what is the auditable aspect and what can be reached out. Because a lot of things might be pre-regulatory or more focusing on general governance, because when we gain a lot of experience, when regulators gain a lot of experience, local governments, if necessary, I don't think the Constitution of India doesn't have any specific mandate that digital technology is regulated, so anyone
some
can
distance away.
Exactly. Union government can do it, state government can do it, anyone can do it. If it is a particular sector like telecom or something, then certain nuances come in the list. But I think the best way is that we need a lot of experience and understanding, both as firms and governments across the world, is to know what we are doing. Because this is a similar question I was asked because I was in a startup 20, because great group started by the Indian presidency in Brazil. It was a virtual session and we were asked feedback about how AI policies are failing in the public sector and all that. So I think once we gain more experience of what's exactly happening, then regulation makes sense.
Absolutely. I think very valid points. And just moving on quickly to you, Ashton.